fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals
So
are
do you
not
think
impinged.
do you think
Number
COVID
one.
do you think
And
COVID
number
do you think
two,
COVID
if I may,
do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
and number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to the border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email, and all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in. So what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, They get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, you know, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Tuesday. So glad to have you here. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And we are really excited to join you. Oh, I'm sorry? What, David?
We're not on?
Oh, I heard...
Oh, okay.
I heard David say something. I'm like, does that mean we're not live? We are live? We are? Okay.
know.
So I just stopped. Hey, welcome in, everybody, to Redacted on this Tuesday night. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
So glad to have you here on a big show because we are literally moments away from hitting 2 million subscribers here on YouTube and getting closer to that 350 range on Rumble as well. But just so flattered. And so we want to thank you so much. So if you subscribe, our goal by the end of the show today, let's see if we can do this. By the end of tonight's show, we will hit 2 million subscribers. Let's see if we can do that.
Oh, we just got one. So thank you, Brian Stelt. Something I saw it too fast. I'm sorry.
Hopefully so.
Thank you for joining us. We have a lot of news to get to because you may have heard about Hunter Biden and his guilty plea with federal investigators. It appears that he got the equivalent of a slap on the hand. We're going to go through exactly what this means. Does it mean we have equal justice under the law? Here's a spoiler. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think that. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. Also, we're going to talk about Ukraine has crossed the Russian border. And of course, these are northern attacks that have been happening near the town and the region of Belgorod. What does that mean for the war as Vladimir Putin this afternoon, of course, announcing multiple attacks on Ukrainian artillery. We're going to go to the front lines and cover that part of the story.
Plus, we have revelations about who was patient zero for COVID, where they came from. Was it a lab or was it out in the wild? This story, which again, we remind you was censored on social media, is now something that we can talk about, and we will talk about the latest revelations.
And also, was Alex Jones right once again? There's that tip jar that goes around, like how many times was Alex Jones correct on the gay frogs question? Well, this has certainly bubbled to the surface, if you'll allow me that pun, given the fact that RFK Jr. on the Joe Rogan podcast brought up some really interesting revelations that maybe vindicate what Alex Jones has been saying for many, many years. Of course, any videos related to this story have been eliminated and removed from YouTube.
And then right on cue, as soon as those videos go viral, 2 major mainstream media outlets publish major hit pieces on RFK Jr., NBC News and the LA Times. I'm going to show you just how unconscionable this is as a journalist, what they're passing as journalism, which is just all out partisan.
Yeah. Also, Tim Ballard is going to be here to talk about his big moves against child sex trafficking. And of course, a partnership coming up with Mel Gibson on a 4-part documentary series. We're going to ask him about Mel Gibson. We're going to ask him about this and so much more. We've got a very busy show for you on this Tuesday. Redacted starts right now. We have a busy show for you on this Tuesday, so I don't want to waste a lot of time. I do want to mention our newsletter, though, at the top of the show, because it's very, very important. We put a lot of hard work into it every morning. Natalie writes it. She spends a number of hours writing it first thing in the morning. We collaborate over coffee. So it is a newsletter written from the heart from Natalie and I, and we publish it around 6:30, 7 a.m. Eastern time, and we cover about 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day. We cover with a little bit of humor, but you can read it in about 5 minutes, and by the time you leave for work or head out the door, we hope that you're more informed. It's a lot of fun, and we don't ask too much of you. All you need to do is go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then you will receive that newsletter first thing in the morning. Again, redacted.inc. It's totally free to subscribe, and it's a great way to kick off your morning. We sort of consider it like the director's track. Maybe this is the show is the director's track to the newsletter.
It's like the album cover that has the words inside.
Yeah. It's got links. It's got all sorts of sourcing and information. So it's a great resource. Hopefully you guys will subscribe to it.
Now, before we start the first story, though, I want to remind you that the last two stories we cannot do here on YouTube, even though we're going to talk about some claims that RFK Jr. has made. It is not controversial science to talk about endocrine disruptors as they relate to reproduction, sexual reproduction. That's not controversial. And we're going to talk about that. But the whole, the whole internet, the West, the left, and the mainstream media has decided you cannot say this. So YouTube has removed videos about this. We're going to show you what, again, is not crazy science and show you how it's being linked to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in order to tank his presidential campaign just as it starts to take off. But we can't do it there. So we will be doing that on another platform. We will tell you when we get to that story. So we're going to first start with Hunter Biden, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that what we're talking about is not really considered crazy in endocrinologist world, and that we're going to not be able to do it here.
Yeah. And also our interview, we're going to touch on a lot of really, really delicate subjects with Tim Ballard as it relates to child trafficking. And YouTube loves to flag those videos as well. So in an age of free speech, this is what we have to deal with in the United States of America. Isn't it crazy? Like this
being anti-trafficking is not good on this platform.
Unbelievable. Okay. All right, let's get to your big story this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you're joining us from, which is Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, of course, after 5 years of being investigated by the IRS and prosecutors, has been charged with federal crimes. This was the front page of the Washington Post. Just look at this. Just take a look at this, how the media does this in Washington. Here's the Washington Post. Look at that picture. Do you think that they would do that with Trump? But I'm just asking, would they have a big love fest picture, like him hugging Melania and like Donald
it looks
Trump
like he's carrying
Jr.?
A giant Bible. Is he carrying a giant Bible?
He is. I didn't even see that. Oh my God, my giant Bible for Inauguration Day. And here's a big kiss, Hunter. Hunter Biden reaches deal to plead guilty in tax and gun case. That's the Washington Post. I mean, you want to know what kind of a clown world we live in. Just look at the framing of that. Unbelievable. So weeks after the Justice Department removes IRS agents from investigating Hunter Biden, yet no explanation on that, by the way. Why were these guys removed from the Hunter Biden IRS investigation? For felony tax evasion, he gets hit with a misdemeanor. Miranda Devine, of course, who's been, Marina Medvin, got my names mixed up, says Hunter Biden has been criminally charged. Hunter's lawyers got a plea deal worked out in advance. This smells fishy, like a throwaway to make it look like even-handed justice. Of course, there's a lot more to Hunter's conduct than this case. And it should be noted, just a frame of reference, right? He gets off with a misdemeanor for having a firearm, lying on a federal background check form, which is a felony, carries up to 10 years in prison. Lil Wayne, rapper Lil Wayne, I call him Little because we go way back, but his friends call, people who don't know him as well as I know him call him Lil. Lil Wayne pleads guilty to federal gun charges. The rapper will be sentenced in January and faces up to 10 years in prison. Just a frame of reference for the exact same crime.
Have you ever seen, though, his deposition, Lil Wayne's deposition for these? It's like a comedy of error. Like, it looks kind of like a Bill Murray movie, like someone who's just taken the piss out of something. It does not look like a real thing. It's highly entertaining. I suggest you look it up on whatever video platform you...
I will.
Yeah, that's fun.
I will. So we're on the same page on that, so that he get, 10 years. Like, that's what he has to deal with, and Hunter Biden gets that. So just a few minutes ago, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy...
Well, we don't know what Hunter Biden will get. Pleading guilty does not mean he's been sentenced, right?
No, he won't get jail time. He's not going to get jail time. He will avoid jail time according to the plea agreement. So he will get out of jail and community service.
Wait, there's no sentencing coming?
No.
No, when they do a plea deal, that's to avoid all that. That's why they do the plea deal.
Yeah,
at least my understanding.
Well, not always. You could plea and then also.
Well, we'll go through the details in a second, but it should be known he's not going to get jail time, and they worked out a plea agreement before the charges were filed. Oh, so like you knew they were coming, right? So you have the deal already in place, and then the charges come. How does that work? would you kind of get that justice? Would you get that kind of treatment? You, me, or anybody else? Of course not. So
here's a question. If someone else were charged with something similar from now on, could they then use this as precedence and say, this person got this, we're going to order, argue in court that this is preferential treatment, so we should get it too?
I don't know. I mean,
would this set precedence for anything else? We think we should.
Depends on their budget.
Yeah, how much money they have. It's not unprecedented. This has happened from time to time. This is not unprecedented. Like, this is the first time in U.S. history this has happened. Mm-hmm. But there's a number of instances where this has happened, where plea agreements have been worked out before charges have been filed. But I mean, you mean just like the average person who lies on a felony background gun application,
right? Or unregistered foreign agents, which now that's a joke because that wasn't even part of the charges.
So not even part of the charges. Yeah.
My friend Alex just texted me and he said he got probation for the felony gun charge and fines for the misdemeanor tax crimes.
Yeah, fines, but no jail time. Just to be clear.
Right.
No jail time.
But is that reporting probation, non-reporting?
Yeah, I mean, who knows in D.C. and,
But we already knew from the Twitter files that he was protected by the FBI. We saw the emails from Elvis Chan from the San Francisco Bureau of the FBI asking Twitter to please not report on certain things regarding the laptop. We saw who was communicating about the laptop, who was calling it a false story, even though they already had possession of the laptop. We already know that he's been protected by the Justice Department. So this shouldn't be surprising as much as it's just a punch to the gut.
Yeah, and of course, also, like, his girlfriend throws the gun in a trash can right near a school, by the way. Imagine if anyone else did that. That's illegal. Throwing a gun away in a trash can near a school. Like, yeah, come on. But no, that's not in the charges at all. So anyway, Kevin McCarthy. So what does this do to the House investigation on this? Because that's a separate thing, right? Like, does this end the House investigation on this? Or are they going full bore with this? Just a few minutes ago, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, spoke about this. Watch.
Can we talk a little bit about the Hunter Biden plea deal and your reaction?
My first reaction is it continues to show the two-tier system in America. If you are the president's leading political opponent, the DOJ tries to literally put you in jail and give you prison time. If you are the president's son, you get a sweetheart deal. Now, this does nothing to our investigation. It actually should enhance our investigations because the DOJ should not be able to withhold any information now.
Okay, but what can the House do is refer findings to the DOJ.
Yeah, because they have no prosecutor.
They can drag it out and then they refer it.
Right.
But then that's all we'll get is transparency. And then all of us will be like riled up and pissed because we'll see more. And nothing will happen.
Well, and we should point out that the IRS piece of this, lying and, people get slapped with audits and problems from the IRS for like a penny being missed on their taxes or $100 being missed on their taxes. How about Hunter Biden $1.2 million that you forgot to file? So again, two-tier justice system. But the taxes piece of this was always sort of seen as like the Al Capone way of capturing him, right? It's like, oh, really? All the murder and the drug running and or the bootlegging or whatever the hell else Al Capone was doing, but you got him on taxes? That was sort of seen in this. So there's a lot more there. And if they do find something that they can specifically point to with these tax statements or these bank statements and all of the other bribery schemes and the payoffs and the money laundering, then of course that can be sent to the DOJ, and you hope that they would take action.
Something new.
You hope that they would take action. So U.S. Attorney David Weiss said today that a plea agreement will not end the Justice Department's DOJ investigation into Hunter Biden. Weiss's office said the investigation into Biden is ongoing. So they're not done. The DOJ as well. So, okay, they're this big piece of it, but I'm just curious, what else then are they looking at? Well, hopefully we'll get clarity on that, exactly what that means. But again, plea deal, no. By the way, I love this AP take on this. So the Associated Press, Hunter Biden will plead guilty in a tax deal that likely averts time behind bars in a tax and gun case. And this is the Associated Press just this afternoon. He will plead guilty to federal tax offenses. He'll plead guilty to misdemeanor tax offenses as part of an agreement made public Tuesday. The deal ends a long-running Justice Department investigation into Biden's second son. Well, it actually doesn't end, so it's lying. This AP article is actually incorrect. And it requires the younger Biden to admit guilt. But then the 6th paragraph down, it immediately switches. Instead of talking about Hunter, it goes into Trump. And then it goes into Trump's problems. This is an article about Hunter Biden. But it cannot, the Associated Press cannot just focus on Hunter Biden and the crimes. No, it has to then spin half the article going into Trump and then his indictment. And
an utter lack of curiosity about the president's taxes, given we know how intertwined their finances were.
Right.
So does this implicate the president? Is there something here that's being given a nice pass? Again, a journalist should ask those questions. These journalists don't, because they are so obviously partisan.
So let me ask you this question. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm waiting for the president to address it and be like, my son, I love him, but I'm glad justice was served. I'm glad that they did what they did and brought, got that taken care of so that we can move on as a country and get over this.
Or, he's like, darn, that Donald Trump and his whole witch hunt thing. Wish I could use that, but it's a bit played out. Got to think of one like that.
So meanwhile, do you think that, I'm going to ask you guys this question. We'll throw this out here to the chat right now. Do you think that the FBI should release the hidden audio recordings and the documents related to President Biden allegedly accepting bribes while vice president of the United States? What do you guys think about that? Would you like to see the evidence that a Ukrainian gas company paid the Bidens perhaps tens of millions of dollars in bribery deals? The Chinese also, wherever this money is flowing from, we don't specifically know, through shell companies, and how this money is being laundered. And yes, that number has now gone up. Instead of $5 million, we're talking 10, maybe even $30 million in bribery monies paid to the Bidens in the latest revelations, which we'll get to in a moment.
Think the Democratic Party always talks about transparency, so it's only fair that they would release it, right?
Yeah, you would think.
Talk about how transparent they are.
Show us. And remember, President Biden said he was going to be, very transparent as a president. So just show us. Show us and explain, and give us these audio recordings. This morning, a new poll out shows that a whopping 83% of voters believe the information the FBI has on it should be made public. 83%. That's not exactly a partisan response, actually, because when you looked at the numbers in the poll, over 3 in 4 Democrats said, yes, we'd like to see it as well. 3 in 4. So Democrats want to see what dirt the FBI is hiding and keeping from the American public.
And the other 1 out of 4 work for the media.
Right. Yeah, they work in the mainstream media.
Don't want to see that.
Yeah. So the allegations of Joe Biden receiving a multi-million-dollar bribe from a Ukrainian company, Barisma, is being totally ignored by the liberal media, and there was virtually no coverage of what happened last week in the Senate. None. Last week, Senator Marsha Blackburn, among other senators, Ted Cruz and others, grilled Josh Hawley. It was really amazing to watch. They grilled the deputy director of the FBI on why this evidence is being redacted from the American people. Watch.
You chose to redact it, yes or no?
We often redact documents to protect sources and methods.
So you chose to redact the fact that there are 17 voice recordings, 2 of those with the now president. You chose to redact that and not to give that to House oversight.
I have
Is
no
that
idea
accurate?
if there are voice recordings or not. What I will tell you with respect to the document, the document was redacted to protect the source, as everyone knows.
Right. So apparently the audio recordings were made by a Barisma whistleblower who has them on the vice president on audio and kept these messages as an insurance policy. Barisma, of course, is the same oil and gas company that had Hunter Biden on its payroll for some inexplicable reason. I don't know why. I mean, Barisma, of course, why exactly was he on the payroll? It's all very fishy. What gas expertise could Hunter Biden provide Barisma? The answer is none. I probably know more about natural gas than Hunter Biden. This whistleblower knew about these alleged bribes and turned it over to the FBI, and the FBI did nothing with it. Sat on it, kept it silent, and continues to keep it silent. So then the whistleblower comes forward to Senator Chuck Grassley in order to get them to do what the FBI wouldn't do. The FBI doesn't appear to be forthcoming, and Senator Ron Johnson also pissed about it. Watch.
Just not being forthright with Congress in terms of telling us what they did do. And you have to ask yourself, why not? Now, obviously, the FBI whistleblower, I think it's pretty obvious, came forward to Senator Grassley because he wasn't satisfied with what the FBI did with that information, which is why he made that 1023 form available to Senator Grassley. So, again, we've got an FBI whistleblower that obviously wasn't satisfied with the investigatory actions of the FBI. And now we have the FBI continuing to cover up and not being forthright with Congress. You know, we have legitimate and constitutional oversight authority. We also have investigatory authority as well. We should have access to these types of investigatory materials, but the FBI is just hiding the ball on us.
Of course, the pieces are starting to come together, though. You'll recall 3 years ago, leaked audio tapes emerged of sitting Vice President Joe Biden reassuring former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko the Ukrainian whistleblower who knew what Biden was up to would be buried, right? That whistleblower had evidence that Biden and Obama were extorting Poroshenko. Why would they need to reassure Poroshenko? Watch, listen.
If it is true that FBI working with him, at least I want to know that.
No, they are not. I told you the FBI concluded he had nothing, and they stopped. That was it. There's no reason to talk to him again.
Okay.
I will check that and confirm that with you.
Okay, he's not supposed to be able to check in on federal investigations.
How does he know this?
Yeah.
How does he know this? So he's reassuring him that the audio tapes related to the Barisma scandal, which a Ukrainian government aide had turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, had been stopped. Okay. That has the FBI made them disappear? Okay.
Which is what launched the Mueller investigation when, the idea that Trump may have asked James Comey to stop an investigation is why we had the Mueller investigation, is because the executive branch should not be able to reach into the judicial branch, period.
Well, and my question is, who does the FBI actually work for? If they don't have to answer to Congress, they don't have to answer to the Senate, they don't have to answer to the president, then are they just a rogue group of investigators that have federal power that can do whatever they want? Because somebody has to demand that they give them the information, or otherwise they're just what? Who runs them?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, they're supposed to be working for the people, and there are a lot of. I mean, you presume there are a lot of, heroes that work there that go after child traffickers.
Well, they're supposed to be doing things that protect us. So protecting tax evasion, okay, that serves a purpose, right? So that the country doesn't go broke and people pay their taxes. Protecting us from foreign agents, unregistered foreign agents. Protecting us from, you could make an argument all manner of things that Hunter Biden has done, one of which is access to a leading political figure for other countries, for other companies to make decisions that will favor foreign companies, foreign actors, and not favor the American people. Because usually, let's say it's Barisma, this Ukrainian power company, whatever they want is probably not in the best interests of America. And so selling the best interests to America through access to high-ranking politicians is what the FBI should want to prevent.
Yeah, you would think.
That's pretty easy. It's easy to draw that line.
So, I mean, how does he get how does the FBI stop this? Like Joe Biden checks in on this after the phone call. He's like, or before the phone call. He's like, I have it on authority. They've stopped this. They've stopped looking into this. Really? How is that possible that the FBI made them disappear and you have the inside scoop on that? So you're able to tell Poroshenko that on the phone, right? That's interesting. How did he learn that in the first place? In other words, someone came forward with damning evidence against Biden, goes to the FBI, and then the FBI basically tells them they're going to cover it up. We know about the bribes. We're just going to cover it up. That's basically what Biden is saying on this phone call with Poroshenko.
Or we won't go further inside of this investigation. Like we'll leave this one on the ground and walk away from it.
We just won't touch it anymore, Joe. Hans Meinke has been tracking all of this and has a new expose coming out this summer exposing every fraud related to the Russiagate story. I can't wait to read it, watch it, see it, whatever it is. He connected the dots on a lot of these phone calls and bribes. And here's Meinke's tweet. He said, if you thought this was bad, Hans notes, that here's the real shocker. Shortly after Poroshenko's aide blew the whistle, Poroshenko asked Biden whether the aide was now cooperating with the FBI. Incredibly, Biden assured Poroshenko that the FBI wasn't pursuing it. And as Dan Bongino rightly pointed out, how would Biden have known that the FBI even dropped this? Like, how do you get the inside scoop on
Again, even asking about it got a special counsel of Robert Mueller for Trump.
Yeah.
All he did was ask, hey, I hope you can let this thing go, or whatever he said, right? Just asking about it was what made Comey write the memo.
Strangely, it's amazing. So he's on the phone with Poroshenko, right? And then there's a readout, like the vice president's office then prints out a readout like, hey, he was on the phone with the Ukrainian president. Here's what they talked about. The White House always does this. The vice president's office always does this. Here's the meeting with Xi Jinping. Here's what they talked about. So the vice president's office then releases an official readout of this phone call with Poroshenko. Notably, the readout of the vice president's call with Poroshenko of Ukraine. I'll just read it. Vice President Joe Biden called Poroshenko today to commend him, the government of Ukraine, and the central bank for their decisive action to strengthen the country's banking sector and protect Ukrainian depositors through the nationalization of the Privat Bank. Of course, the Privat Bank is the same bank that he wanted closed down because the money trail was all hidden inside a Privat Bank and how all that money was being put in different shell companies and funneling to the Biden administration or to the Bidens. So, of course, you'd want it shut down because if Trump's coming in, he's going to have questions. And that's exactly what came out on those phone calls with Poroshenko. He wanted the Privat Bank closed down. So there's no mention in this White House readout of anything about the FBI investigation. It's curious why the White House, the office of the vice president, just deleted that part of the phone call. There's no record of him talking to Poroshenko about an FBI investigation or a whistleblower going to the FBI. Why did they leave that out? It's amazing. It's amazing. Members of Congress say this is getting worse by the minute. James Comer, who's running this investigation in the House, says these bribes are not just $5 million. It's going up as high as $30 million in illegal bribes to the Biden family. Listen to his interview with Maria.
If this is all true about a sitting president when he was vice president, influence peddling, accepting money from foreign nationals so that he could turn around and make changes in policy for America so he could pocket the money, if that's true, why isn't he impeached already? And if it's true that the FBI is doing nothing about it, why isn't Christopher Wray on his heels as well?
Those are great questions I ask every day. Look, Christopher Wray has no control over the FBI. One thing that I've learned from dealing with Grassley's whistleblowers is that this is an organization in disarray. No one has confidence in leadership at the top. You have bureaucrats, deep state bureaucrats, who are running the show. They're partisan. They want to get Donald Trump. They don't care what Joe Biden does because Joe Biden can be controlled. So we have issues with the FBI, but my investigation is about following the money. We're going to continue to follow the money. And Maria, I can assure you there's more money that we're going to be able to identify that was transferred between foreign nationals in other countries and the Biden family. This is going to be hard for Joe Biden to explain, and it's not going to go away. This is going to be an issue, and I think eventually the mainstream media will turn on Joe Biden and start asking the real questions. What did your family do to receive all this money?
What number are you up to now? How much have you identified of the money he's taken in from foreign nationals?
We have more bank records coming in, but we're going to exceed $10 million this week, right. And I think we'll get up between $20 and $30 million.
Okay.
Well, what he seems to be indicating there is even what the FBI wants to do may not be relevant. That when he's dealing with these whistleblowers, there is some kind of outside political pressure that shows us that the separation of these branches of government is a ruse. It's just not there. Yeah. That even if the FBI wants to do the right thing, they are unable because of who is currently in power. Mm-hmm. And that the people that are in power now are subverting the laws of justice. And it is not equal justice under the law when it comes to political parties. I don't know how you would argue any other way that this is fair.
What's amazing is when you watch that FBI Senate hearing the other day, Democrats didn't ask the deputy director anything about it. Nothing. All of the Democrats were on the same page. Ted Cruz called him out during the testimony, and he said not one Democrat will ask a question about this because they're all controlled by the mainstream media, the corporate media. I would say a lot of Republicans are as well, that, they're not above that. I believe both parties are pretty corrupt, but when it comes to our justice system,
And
Absolutely.
both parties have this sort of blind loyalty. For instance, during the Trump years, if anyone in a Republican sphere was found guilty of any kind of sexual misconduct, all other Republicans were like, oh, I don't see that, because if I see that, I have to see Trump's stuff, and I don't want to see that at all. And this does nobody any favors when each party falls in line of this blind faith, and I will not see what is inconvenient for the party and the power system that I have filed behind. Look where it's getting us.
Yeah.
It's getting us nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And that's shameful. We should all want everyone who's done wrong to answer for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
well,
true.
And also just the simple fact that if you look at like the last several elections, how integral the FBI was in deciding the winner. Like it pretty much decided the winners in the past couple elections because of the stories that they either held, changed, or put out.
Yeah, they absolutely influenced them, which like also says terrible things about us, that we don't have uncorrupt choices for politicians. And that's depressing.
Right. So who has fewer indictments? Like, who's got, who hasn't killed somebody?
Well, that was like that poll that I told you about the other day, where it was like something like 71% of the people polled said that Biden is way too old to be president. Trump is a criminal, and DeSantis is, I can't remember what it said about DeSantis, but basically like 71% of people are like, can we please have anyone else to vote for? And it was just like, please.
No, because the powers that be, when you understand, I'm reading right now a book on Prescott Bush and the history of the Bush family. And oh my God, you want to talk about some dirty dealings. Holy smokes, the deals that Prescott Bush made with the Nazis. Oh man. And how to solidify that relationship. It's like these parties are, and these people are picked basically to become president. Right. So the idea that we really get to vote to pick who we want is, it's just a joke. They pick, the deep state picks who they want to put up, and they make the backroom deals to make sure that the money flows in the right direction. And then the other people are pushed out and blocked. And that's how it goes. It's really disheartening.
And they're private parties. Like people don't understand the Republican and Democrat parties are private parties. So they're not held accountable by the government at all. They can change rules, make up rules however they want. I mean, I witnessed it firsthand. And so like we have literally no control over our presidents.
Yeah.
Sad stuff. Well, we got more news to get to here. We're going to talk about the war in just a moment and the major moves that the armies have made over the past 24 hours. It's pretty devastating. We'll tell you about that. Plus, hey, they may have found patient zero as it relates to COVID. And where was this person working? Well, you give us some ideas. Give us some thoughts. Maybe take your vote, put it in the chat today if you can figure out where this person might have been working. That was patient zero, patient 1, 2, and 3 in all of this. But first, it's no secret right now, if you're tuned in, experts predicting a big problem right now. We're looking at right now the commercial real estate collapse. Office space, a lot of trouble right now. People are pouring into residential real estate, and they're pouring into precious metals because of what's about to happen to the U.S. dollar. $32 trillion in debt. And our friends over at Lear Capital can help you get set up investing in precious metals, even if it's just a little bit of your savings that you have tied to the U.S. dollar. Instead of having $100 in a savings account, maybe thinking about transferring that and putting that into gold or silver, silver coins, gold, silver bars. Gold and silver right now, and for 5,000 years, has sustained its value. And when all other government currencies have collapsed, gold and silver have survived. And they'll set you up with a self-directed IRA, which you can purchase precious metals with your retirement funds as well, tax-free. So it can grow inside of a self-directed IRA, tax-free. You can hold the gold and silver at your location if you want, like if you've got a safe or in a storage facility that's fully protected and guarded, like Natalie and I do. But I just wanted to show you. So just got some of my new silver bars from Lear. So this is a silver bar. So cool. And here's one of our gold coins. This is 1 ounce of fine gold from, hold it up to the camera there, 1 ounce of fine gold right there from Lear. Shipped, and you can get these like shipped to your house as well if you want to keep them stored locally. Here's a silver bar. Silver is really cheap right now, half of its cost for an ounce of silver of its all-time high right now. So silver and gold, my friends, the way to go. I was talking with a buddy today who follows this stuff very, very closely. And he's like, are you guys getting ready for the banking collapse? And I said, yes, we are. Natalie and I have been preparing. We're very, very, and he said, please, please, please make sure you and Natalie are safe. And so we were talking offline before the show, a friend who is plugged in. So please pay attention, guys. Please protect your family, however you do it. If you use Lear or somebody else, I don't care, but make sure you're investing in gold and silver, precious metals. Protect your family against what's going to happen to the U.S. dollar and the banking crisis right now. So call their 1-800 number right now. They'll give you a free gold and silver kit, 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com. Again, 1-800-613-3557. Get on the phone with them. Just talk to them. See if it's a fit for you. Or go to LearRedacted.com. All right, we've got more news to get to. Let's talk about the war in Ukraine. So Patrick Lancaster has been on the front lines. He's been in the northern part of, he's been in the northern part of the war front, I guess you could call it. He's been in the Belgorod region, which, as someone in the chat just pointed out, means White City. And this is an area where Ukrainian forces have been entering. Now, this is pre-war Russia, pre-war Russian territory. So as we talked about the other night on the show, this idea of a counteroffensive to reclaim land. Well, this is not land that was ever part of this before the war. This was Russian territory. So why are there attacks being carried out in these small towns? Overnight, Vladimir Putin announcing major attacks that took out 2 massive artillery batteries, as well as a part of another Russian offensive, which took out multiple armored vehicles, as well as tanks. So what is left of this army? It's being absolutely destroyed. Patrick Lancaster is on the front lines in the Belgorod region watching these attacks.
I'm Patrick Lancaster, and I'm here on the Belgorod-Kharkov border. Right behind me, this fence we see behind me, with Russian infantry, and right across the dip here is Ukrainian positions. We're going to talk to the infantry, see what the real situation is here on the ground. We've already heard some incoming and outgoing shells. We're so close to the border here. They tell us to wear white or red bands because it's an identifier of friend or foe. So they know we're not Ukrainians, because Ukrainian soldiers have blue or yellow, and the Russians wear white or red. Now, this is a special update for Redacted. We've got a lot to come. Stick with us.
А какие здесь рядом населенные пункты?
Волжанка, Огурцово.
Огурцово – это
территория Украины.
Ага. Расскажи, пожалуйста, вот бой, который был вот 1 числа. Вот прям.
Это в 2 часа с лишним мы услышали гул техники. Передний секрет доложил, что это была саперная инженерная техника, прорывала забор границы. В 2 местах проложили дорогу. Вот. Гранатометчик поразил цель, но технику ему удалось эвакуировать на первый день, 1 июня.
Понял. Сейчас поподробнее. Значит, откуда начинала выдвигаться техника?
С лесополосы.
Ну, с какого направления?
Приблизительно с Огурцова.
Куда она двигалась?
В сторону Новой Волжи.
И вот что это за техника, и как она шла, и во сколько это было?
Это было где-то примерно в 2:15-2:20 была инженерно-саперная техника.
И она выдвигалась?
Она прокладывала дорогу в сторону Новой Волжи.
Какие ваши действия в это время были? Вот вы услышали гул техники, что было дальше?
Заняли позиции, гранатометчик поразил инженерно-саперную технику. В дальнейшем ее
начали эвакуировать.
Да, ее эвакуировали.
Что было на 2-й день?
На 2-й день также услышали гул техники, вот, тоже заняли позиции. Увидели с позиции, как на нашу территорию уже заезжают танки с флагами РДК. Вот, тоже хотели открыть огонь, не получилось из-за шквального огня минометами. Тоже в сторону наших позиций и по соседним направлениям. Вот. Затем начала работать уже и наша артиллерия. Там, через какое-то время танки ушли. Вот. Затем через несколько дней, уже когда все закончилось, к нам пришли разведчики, с помощью квадрокоптеров увидели в лесу пару брошенных танков с этими же флагами. Вот, решили вдвоем в помощь пойти тоже туда на разведку посмотреть. Пришли, обнаружили там еще один взорванный танк, видимо, наша артиллерия, вот, и 2 брошенных. Тоже сорвали эти флаги и гранатами F1 в люки кинули, уничтожили оставшиеся 2 танка.
Где ты находился в тот момент, когда техника уже возвращалась с Новой Таволжанки?
Находился на своей позиции, также здесь, возле границы.
В этот момент что делала украинская артиллерия?
Она практически беспрерывно наносила удары минометами и своей артиллерией вот по Новой Таволжанке в разные точки. Как и по гражданским домам, так и по где лесополосы.
Вот проговори фразу именно. Артиллерия начала когда работать? До начала движения танков или после, или вовремя? Вот она сопровождала работу танков. То есть вот когда, скажем так, когда украинская артиллерия ввязалась в бой? Вот какой-то момент был?
Ну, это также с ночью было. Мы вот слышали гул техники, она работала.
Стоп, вот ты говоришь, что сначала так...
Как бы артиллерия, она работала практически постоянно, даже до того, как они зашли. Только что когда танки уже зашли, она начала работать еще активнее.
Куда она работала?
Работала и по жилым домам, и по лесополосам, где находились наши военнослужащие. То есть, можно сказать, по всей Новой Таволжанке.
То есть я правильно понимаю, что украинская артиллерия именно сопровождала, да, вот проход этих танков? И...
Ну, да, сопровождалась артиллерией.
Ага. Вот дальше танки мимо вас прошли, и что дальше было?
Ну, какие-то заехали, вот один из танков открывал огонь в нашу сторону, мы не могли из-за этого высунуться, еще много его увидеть. Потом он уже начал отходить, когда наша артиллерия начала сюда уже по этим танкам бомбить, тогда они ушли.
Когда наша артиллерия начала работать по этим танкам?
Наша артиллерия начала работать, когда танки уже заехали в Новую Таволжанку. Уже когда преодолели вот этот забор границы, зашли на территорию, наша артиллерия начала отрабатывать по ним.
Дальше они скрылись?
Да, они поездили, постреляли и ушли в обратном в том же направлении. Когда закончила работать наша артиллерия, мы через некоторое время с разведчиками выдвинулись в то направление, куда уехали вражеские танки, чтобы проверить их.
Что было дальше?
Дальше мы увидели, что танки пустые, экипаж у них отсутствует. Вот. Досмотрели, сорвали вражеские флаги и уничтожили гранатами F1, бросив их в открытые люки.
Что за флаги были на танках?
Флаги были террористической группировки, белый, синий, белый цвет. В середине был эмблема кулак.
Вы сами этот флаг видели?
Сами лично видели эти флаги.
Это чей флага?
Это флаг террористической группировки РДК.
Ага.
Русский добровольческий корпус.
И как на твое слово, твое мнение, что это, что они?
Честно, я даже не понимаю их мотивов, но ничего хорошего в их действиях не вижу.
Ага. Потому что Украина сказала, это они на территории России, РДК, не Украина войска, но мы видим очень много натовских оружия. Если Украина сказала, это не украинские войска, мой вопрос, как РДК натовские оружия, как вы думали?
Ну, значит, у них хорошо работает группа вербовки, на мой взгляд. Я сам лично таких мотивов не понимаю.
Угу. Понял, это тяжело понимать. Это
тяжело понять, да.
Да, что не так, я думал. И можно сказать, что это там?
Это группа моей крови.
Ага, если so, да? Ага. И на твое оружие это...
Позывной.
Ага, понял. И почему твое позывной это? Что это?
Так меня друзья называли. В мирное время на гражданке решил оставить прозвище как позывной.
И как долго вы был солдат?
В общей сумме уже 4-й год.
Ага. И вы?
9 месяцев.
9 месяцев. Вы мобилизация или?
Мобилизован.
Ага, понял. Но вы контракт, да?
Ну, на данный момент я мобилизованный. До этого еще было.
До был. Ага, понял. Интересно. И как вы думал, как долго война будет еще?
Надеюсь, что в этом году она закончится.
Да? Но думал, это реально?
Я думаю, это реально, да.
Что нужно за это?
Ну, мне кажется, для начала нужны переговоры, только я не понимаю, почему мешают их осуществить мирно. А так, действия наших властей не помешали бы как бы уже поактивнее, мое мнение. Чтобы это уже развертывалось не только на территории нашей, России, как-то дать ему более сильный отпор.
Понял. So, спасибо. Redacted. We have come even farther, and we see the fence knocked down here. This is where Ukrainian tanks came across and encroached onto Russian territory. This is Belgrade, Russia, and that is Kharkov region, Ukraine. And this is where the Ukrainian tanks came across onto Russian proper soil. All right, and you see it up close. Now, we're under the impression that at least one of these tanks was destroyed not far from here, just up the hill a bit, but still in Russian territory. And now we're going to try to fly the drone and get up above it and take a closer look, because we can't get to it on foot because we'll explode and die because of minefields all around it.
Вот здесь мы наблюдаем с вами дорогу, да, по которой вооруженные силы Украины. Вот это что за накатанная? Это накатанная дорога танками. Сейчас покажу, он ведет к месту пролома в границе. Вот это пролом границы, забор. Да. Сейчас было понятно, побыстрее. И вот само место, где стоят танки. То есть это уже на отходе их подбили, получается? Да, на отходе подбили. Они заехали, застряли, и наша артиллерия их разбила. А рядом что с танками? Рядом, недалеко от танков, машина, да, ремонтная, которая пыталась, я так понимаю, их вытащить. Но была замечена, потому что видно то, что она уезжала, вот дорога идет. Она уезжала, откатывалась в кусты, но, к сожалению, у нее не получилось. Она тоже была разбита. Вот. Вот сейчас где мы подлетаем? Сейчас мы подлетаем к поселку Огурцово. Сейчас мы покажем вам. Здесь вот есть позиции вооруженных сил Украины. У них было небольшое преимущество тем, что они находились на высоте, да, то есть вот если посмотреться, вот стоял, может, какой-нибудь миномет, да, потому что четко прикрыто вот место. Да. Какой-нибудь польский миномет может идеально встать. А вот это окопа получается? Да. Все, понесло ветер.
All right, and now that is the Ukrainian tank that was destroyed by the assault forces, infantry forces, and reconnaissance forces of the Russian army. Pushing it to the max. Can't stay in one place for too long, but let's move forward. All right, Redacted. This is historic information. We hope you get something out of it, because we're putting our lives on the line out here to bring you these stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you so much, Patrick, for that report, interviewing these Russian soldiers there who were talking about these incursions across the Russian border in pre-war Russia. And it's amazing to see the behind the scenes of, hitting these artillery positions, hitting these tanks. And these are NATO weapons that are in Russia, even though they're saying that that's not the case. And of course, if you heard in that one interview, and look, I apologize if you listen to the podcast episode version of this, you're not going to hear my voice for 10 minutes reading subtitles. No one wants to hear that. So watch the video version. You don't have to listen to it while you're driving. Come check it out on video and sit down and just watch it, because it's compelling to watch. So you don't want to hear my voice for 10 minutes over that. But to hear those soldiers in that initial interview reading the subtitles, and you understand that they're saying, why is there no one negotiating peace? And of course, last night we showed Vladimir Putin holding up the peace agreement that was signed by the Ukrainian side, but because the Western powers, the NATO forces, don't want peace, They want this to be a forever war, and they want to use every last Ukrainian because they don't give a shit about the Ukrainians. NATO will use them and use them and use them. And that's exactly what's happening here. And so this war continues. This war continues.
And just today, the Russian armed forces released these numbers, which I think are shocking. They claim, this is their claims, but again, remember, it's Western governments and Western taxpayers who are paying for this weapon to be used in fireworks shows. Here's the numbers. They claim to have destroyed 444 Ukrainian warplanes, 240 helicopters, 4,700 unmanned aerial vehicles, 426 surface-to-air missile systems, 10,192 tanks and other armored combat vehicles, 1,125 multiple rocket launchers, 5,163 field artillery guns and mortars, and 11,047 special military motor vehicles since the start of the military operation in Ukraine. You still want to send more weapons? Is that how you feel?
Right.
What were you going to say, David?
Wow. I was just going to say, like, watching that video when that guy was doing the drone and you heard that, like, whatever that was, that shell go off in the distance, nobody flinched. They just, like, were perfectly calm and still. And just think how your mind has to, you know, get so used to that it doesn't even make you flinch when something like I would have been like on the ground. Is that coming to us? Is that us sending it out? Like, and they're just like sitting there like nothing's happening. So that's just a testament to like what it must take in your mind to shut things off like that when you're in war.
Yeah.
Chatterbox Load in our chat says Redacted is redacting this war. I'm unsubscribing soon. Okay. So can you tell me what other news organization you see that is actually covering the front lines of this war? I mean, if you want to go back to watching CNN Chatterbox, can you please let me know? I'm just curious what we're redacting. We're trying to unredact. That's exactly what we do here. So please be specific.
All right. Well, you can have a conversation with him later, but I will first tell you about our friends over at Ghostbed because we have COVID to talk about. So let's get to that. Did you know that you can find the right mattress for your body without ever setting foot in a mattress store? Well, you can because the folks at Ghostbed are experts at helping you find your perfect mattress and shipping it right to your door. For over 20 years, Ghostbed has been designing comfortable mattresses for every type of sleeper. And they're experts when it comes to pairing customers with the best mattresses for them. So go to ghostbed.com today and take their online quiz to get your personalized recommendation. Or if you prefer to talk to a real person, you can go to Ghostbed Sleep Experts and they'll help you find the right match one-on-one with a free consultation. Orders ship fast and free, and you'll get a 101-night sleep trial to make sure that your mattress is the right fit for you. So for a limited time, our listeners can get an exclusive offer. You can take 40% off all Ghostbed mattresses, plus get 2 luxury pillows by using our promo code REDACTED at ghostbed.com/redacted to take advantage of this offer. Once again, that's www.ghostbed.com/redacted and use our promo code REDACTED.
That's right.
All right. Well, have we found COVID patient zero? It seems like some investigators may have. And guess what? They were all members of the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Imagine that.
That's interesting. Now, this story comes from Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, and Alid Gutentag, all Twitter Files reporters, by the way, who have looked under the hood and seen what governments did in order to censor COVID information. We've gone over that extensively. And here is what those investigative journalists say. According to multiple U.S. government officials interviewed as part of a lengthy investigation by Public and Racket, the first people infected by the virus, patient zero, included Ben Hugh, this person you're looking at right now, a researcher who led the WIV's gain of function research on SARS-like coronaviruses, which increase the infectiousness of viruses. Now, 2 other patients were also, I guess we're calling them patient zero, but there are 3 of them. They also were lab employees. They are Yuping and Yangzhu. Now, Wuhan lab and gain of function. Do you remember not too long ago how we were not even really allowed to say those things, not posit that COVID leaked from a lab because the United States did not want us to make the connection between what was being funded and what actually had happened. Do you remember headlines like this? Senator Tom Collins was called fringe theorists for talking about COVID labs origins, for talking about lab leak, even saying lab leaker. Here's PolitiFact saying Tucker Carlson guest airs debunked COVID conspiracy theory. They thought that that was a done deal. Definitely didn't come from the labs. This one, New York Times COVID reporter deletes tweet claiming racist roots of lab leak theory after backlash. Remember how President Trump himself was called racist for even saying that this may have come from China, that it came from a lab, that it was manufactured in a lab. They called him a conspiracy theorist. They called him bogus. Now, we also have spoken extensively, so I won't repeat myself, about how Dr. Anthony Fauci and other WHO scientists altered scientific papers to discourage further research into a lab leak. We know that they actively shut that down. We also know that the State Department funded a project to censor media outlets through something called the Global Disinformation Index, the GDI. Do you remember this? That they were seeking out what they called conspiracy theories related to the COVID lab link and punishing all media outlets for saying so. What they did was work through this British nonprofit group that received at least $665,000 from the Global Center and the National Endowment for Society, or NED. And in fact, the Washington Examiner reported that the State Department, the U.S. State Department, was donating at least $330 million in taxpayer dollars to NED, and in order to rank news organizations and then tell advertisers not to work with them. Here is, I just want to remind you, we'll watch maybe the first half. It's a 2-minute video of the Washington Examiner proving that any media organization that covered the lab link was put on this list so that advertisers wouldn't work with them.
Well-funded disinformation tracking groups are part of a stealth operation blacklisting and trying to defund conservative media, likely costing news companies large sums in advertising dollars. A Washington Examiner investigation has found these companies compile a secret blacklist and feed them to ad companies, with the aim of defunding and shutting down disfavored speech. The Global Disinformation Indexes rates news outlets based on their alleged disinformation risk factor. Those they deem risky are placed on an exclusion list developed by GDI's advisory panel, which include Ben Nimmo, a global lead for threat intelligence at Facebook's parent company Meta, and journalist Ann Applebaum, who has said Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings are not, quote, interesting. The Washington Examiner is on GDI's exclusion list, but the Washington Examiner was never contacted by GDI or informed of how it failed to meet GDI's standards. GDI discloses in reports which outlets it identifies as the riskiest and worst offenders for peddling disinformation. The top 10 all skew to the right. Some on the list are Newsmax, The Federalist, The American Conservative, One America News, The Daily Wire, and Real Clear Politics. On the flip side, all the websites GDI ranks as the least riskiest lean left in their news coverage. These include NPR, The Associated Press, The New York Times, USA Today, and The Washington Post. GDI's disinformation tracking efforts have even resulted in opinion pieces being flagged. A Washington Examiner commentary article titled "The Less Gender-Bending Obsession is Tiresome and Absurd" was labeled as anti-LGBTQ+ disinformation. That same memo singled out Amazon for hosting ads in the Washington Examiner.
Okay, we can stop here. So some of the things that they say in that is that anyone who covered the lab leak, the COVID lab link, was considered highly risky, and they then pass that on to advertisers, and they would tell Amazon, hey, you put a chair ad on this risky article about a COVID lab link. How about you don't do that anymore so that those advertisers don't benefit from that ad revenue? So at least now we can talk about this. And, I shudder to think what we would get as a GDI index, but we're going to do it anyway. So in 2017, a Chinese news report. Oh, nope, I'm skipping ahead. Sorry, I want to show you this. Here is what the report says. It says, as such, we don't know where the Wuhan scientists who had developed COVID illnesses or we do know that they developed COVID-like illnesses in November 2019. And also they were working with the closest relatives of SARS-CoV-2 and inserting gain-of-function features unique to it. When a source was asked how certain they were that these were the identities of the 3 Wuhan scientists who developed symptoms consistent with COVID-19 in the fall of 2019, we were told 100%. What they had seemed to track. And in fact, in 2017, a Chinese news report that we're about to see here did show Ben Hu working on viruses without protective gear. You can see him talking to the media and, not using protective gear and moving around vials, right? If this is like what do you call it, Philip? A level 3 lab or a level 4 lab?
VSL, virus security level 3 or 4. It should be at least a 3, and media should not be in there.
Right. And so what they're doing they're like, oh, I got my hands behind my back and just one person wearing gloves. I don't think that's protocol, right?
No, I don't think so either. And of course, we also saw the reports of how they were storing things in a freezer, like the freezer with all sorts of frost hanging around the freezer. So it was open and not even secured.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this lab did have U.S. National Institute of Health funding. We know this now. In 2014, President Obama at the time banned federal funding for gain-of-function research, but the NIH went ahead and did what they wanted anyway because they deemed their work on SARS-like viruses as not falling under gain-of-function. They thought, that doesn't apply to us. We're going to do what we want. And they continued to fund this project in China and Southeast Asia anyway. There will be more revelations like this. We are now allowed to talk about this, whereas about 2 years ago we were not. Because next week, the Directorate of National Intelligence is expected to release classified material that is no longer previously classified, which may include the names of the 3 scientists who were likely to be among the first patients sickened by COVID. And President Biden signed a bill earlier this year that called for the release of the names of these researchers. So we may continue to see more. Now, I know that a lot of you still feel like, this is over. I don't want to talk about it anymore. But we continue to feel like we have to because we were told lies about why we couldn't speculate where the virus came from. We were shut down on a lot of legitimate conversations. We were told that certain questions were conspiracy theory. We're going to see that even more when we talk about RFK Jr. at the end of the show, when we move to another platform to do that. And we have to pay attention to what happened to us in the recent past in order to make sure it doesn't happen in the recent future.
Well, we absolutely should never forget this. And it's an incredibly important topic. And I think a lot of people in our chat are saying that. They're like, we need Nuremberg trials 2.0 to get to the bottom of this and who lied and how many people died. We saw, of course, Rachel Walensky testifying, was it last week or week before, in front of Congress. And there was a reporter sitting in the front row who shook her hand and said, Rachel, I'm really thankful that you're going to be testifying today. It'd be really interesting to hear how you defend helping to the death of 34,000 Americans. Thanks so much for the work that you've done. And wanting to know, pushing this vaccine, pushing these jabs, and pushing what happened here on people. We just saw the report out of Chile today, how now they're moving back into full-on masking because of RSV being found in the outbreak there. So this like culture around like lockdowns and forced vaccinations, and now the WHO moving forward with this sort of global government to control all of us. We absolutely need to continue to ask these questions.
Yeah.
We should never just sit back and say, well, that was last year. COVID was last year, because all of the underlying pieces of this are still there. And
right.
what they're going to do to us and what they're currently doing to us should be incredibly troubling. We have a few days left until the U.S. federal government rolls out the FedNow digital currency program to track everything that we do. Right? All of these pieces are part of this larger puzzle that we need to fight against. That's why you watch our show, and that's why we're here.
Right. And one of the things that RFK Jr. said recently on Jordan Peterson's podcast is that during the Reagan administration, President Reagan was dealing with harms related to vaccines. And he said to some of the pharmaceutical companies, why can't you just make it safer? And they literally said to him, it's not possible. We cannot. And so they lobbied and received blanket immunity, the biopharmaceutical companies, for all vaccines moving forward. And this is a power that can and has been exploited to the detriment of the general population. And so we're going to continue to talk about why is the mainstream media, why is social media interested in shutting down conversations around things that are not really that controversial, such as endocrine disruptors mess with your reproductive system. This is not controversial. It's the reason that sort of, woke lefties like me when my kids were really little, turn their nose up at BPA, like in your baby bottles. We know this. That's an endocrine disruptor. It should not make us mad to talk about how it affects amphibians, but it somehow hurts our feelings. I don't get it. And so we're going to talk about it as it relates to stinking gay frogs and all of that stuff, because I don't understand the lack of curiosity in the mainstream media for their own manufactured consent, and I'm not having it.
Good for you. Blur in our chat. Thank you, Blur. Blur says, stay on it, Redacted. We can't forget. No, we can't. We've got to keep digging on this and bring these people to justice and make sure that we're protected from it in the future. Absolutely the case. And protect our families. So, yes, we need to stay on it. Hey, we're nearing 2 million. Okay.
Are we getting there?
Well,
Look,
200.
Just a few hundred.
We just started, and we have 200 new subscribers since we started the show tonight. So thank you guys so much for subscribing, because we're almost at 2 million on YouTube. That's unbelievable to me. But thank you guys so much. Take that, CNN. Take that, CNN. I love when you look at the weekly viewers of our show, it's unbelievable compared to like what the mainstream media does these days. It's amazing to see.
I think, didn't Brian Stelter subscribe earlier? Like, wasn't that?
Wouldn't that be funny? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we've got a lot of great guests. People are asking in the chat, can Dr. Stephen Greer come on the show? Yes, Dr. Stephen Greer is going to be on the show, and I'm going to ask him some tough questions, because there's some differences between what he and Michael Sala believe in, and I'm going to have, and we're going to have a great discussion. He's going to be on later in the week. Yes, I'm actually going to be interviewing Eric Hecker, who was stationed in Antarctica for Raytheon. He's going to be on the show. I've got some really great guests coming up here on the program really, really soon. So excited about that. Yes. So, but we got a lot more news to get to, and we're going to do that on Rumble in a minute. We're going to go to Rumble in just a minute, because we're going to talk about was Alex Jones right about this gay fish, gay frogs story? And what does that have to do with RFK Jr.? And those videos have been pulled off of YouTube and banned. So we're going to go to another platform for that in just a moment. We're also going to have Tim Ballard on here to talk about this child trafficking and what they're doing to try to stop that as well. But first, oh boy, our friends over at MooMoo have an amazing deal just for the month of June. Guys, would you like 17 free stocks? Would you like 15 free stocks plus perhaps a Google or Tesla stock? And on top of that, a free AI stock? That's right. That's what MooMoo is doing right now. That's 17 total free stocks. With MooMoo, my favorite trading platform, there's no steep learning curve. It has a simple interface. It's easy to use, so even beginners can take advantage of the stock market in no time. And right now, they are giving away these free stocks when you open your account and you make your initial deposits. To learn more, check out our link at redacted.inc/MooMoo. That's MooMoo. They are a massive company, and MooMoo has zero commission trades, and the app looks amazing on every platform, from iOS to Android to Windows and Mac. MooMoo can help you trade with its advanced tools like their stock screener and their earnings calendar. No matter what your skill level is, you'll find fantastic tools that can help you trade. I absolutely love trading with MooMoo. That's where I trade a lot of my commodity stocks. So get access to zero commission trades and 17 free stocks, which includes a free AI stock and either Google or Tesla stock, for a total of 17 free stocks when you make your initial deposits. So even if you never do anything else with this account, you just open it, make your initial deposits, you get these free stocks, and let them grow. Again, go to redacted.inc/MooMoo. The website, once again, to get these free stocks and open your account today, is redacted.inc/MooMoo. All right. So we are going to, for these next two stories, we don't feel comfortable doing them here on YouTube for obvious reasons. Because a number of videos around this subject over the past 48 hours have been blocked and taken down on this platform. So we can't do it here. RFK Jr. any interviews with him or discussions about it, they seem to be censoring it. So it seems like the deep state really does not want him to become president of the United States, and they don't want a discussion about what he's talking about. So for that, we are going to go over to Rumble. We're going to rumble.com/redacted. That's where we are going. You can do whatever you'd like. We'd love for you to join us if you want to. No pressure. But that's where we will continue the rest of the show. So we're going to have to end the stream. We're also going to have Tim Ballard on the show. We're going to be talking about some really sensitive things around child trafficking. And again, YouTube doesn't like that stuff. Real news. But we hope you'll come over to our Rumble channel if you'd like to. Rumble.com/redacted. Subscribe over there as well if you do. And so